Welcome to Tales from the Fandom, a podcast that brings a special guest out of the multiverse and straight to you. And now your host, David Ginsburg.
Hey everybody, I wanted to let you know about a campaign I'm taking part in called 2 Pods a Day. It aims to introduce podcast listeners to 2 independent podcasts every day for the month of August. We hope to give visibility to some of the great indie podcasts that you probably haven't heard of. 2 Pods a Day encourages you to listen more and listen indie. You can find more shows like mine by following hashtag 2PodsAday on Twitter or by searching for 2 Pods a Day on Facebook. Or you can go to www.2podsaday.wordpress.com to see all the episodes and podcasts that are going to be promoted in August. I'm not sure if that's up yet, but it will be once August rolls around. And I am very happy to be a part of it this month, or next month in August. But I hope you enjoy the episode that's coming up, and thank you for listening. Welcome to Tales from the Fandom, the podcast that brings a special guest out of the multiverse and straight to you. Today we have the special opportunity to talk to one of the hosts and dungeon masters of one of my favorite actual play podcasts. I'm with Joe of You Meet in a Tavern. Welcome to the podcast, Joe.
Thanks for having me, David. I'm excited to talk with you.
I am excited too. I have been a big fan of your podcast almost since the initial moment that I had found out about it, and I got behind, and then I got to catch up and binge listen, as they say, and now I'm 2 episodes down, but I am thrilled to have you on the podcast.
Awesome.
I mean, we've got a lot to talk about. Obviously, Dungeons and Dragons is one of your bigger fandoms.
Yes.
But
yes.
Is there others that might have influenced you or stuff that you're into now besides Dungeons and Dragons?
Yeah, I think, Dungeons and Dragons really, like, just the setting of it all in this kind of medieval fantasy role-playing world is really, what I've mostly been into my whole life in my history of being a nerd. I think I got started reading the Lord of the Rings books and watching those movies. As a kid, my mom kind of introduced me to the whole trilogy, starting with The Hobbit and then, the main 3 books. So I really got into those, reading those as a kid, and it kind of just spiraled from there into getting my first N64 and playing Legend of Zelda and all that kind of stuff. So I'm really into sword and shield type medieval fantasy stuff.
Awesome. What's your favorite Lord of the Rings book, if you have one?
I think Two Towers has to be my favorite. I love okay, I can't even think of the battle now. I'd say it's my favorite, and it just blank on me.
Helm's Deep?
Helm's Deep, there it is. Yeah, I love the Battle of Helm's Deep. I love how the movies did it as well. I think that was the book to me that had the most kind of action-packed drama. So to me, that was my favorite out of the 3 for sure.
And of course, I do have to ask, who is your favorite character in the series?
Gosh. Let's see. I'm gonna have to go with Gimli on this one. And I think basically his persona in the movies and the books is this like hero, this badass that has a lot of funny qualities to himself. He's kind of like the comic relief in the movies. And I think that ties in really well with our podcast, like Dungeons and Dragons, because, we have a serious story. There's a lot of drama in it, but we tell jokes, we laugh. So I really liked his character. I think he was willing to do a lot. Like there was the scene in Helm's Deep where he was kind of embarrassed to be thrown into this bridge of a bunch of orcs that were storming the castle, and he was like, okay, you know what, whatever, if this is gonna help us win the battle, bring it on, throw me. So
exactly. And perfect casting with John Rhys Davies for Gimli.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's a good name drop right there.
Exactly. I gotta be up on the actors and actresses and everything. But I loved him way back in like Indiana Jones, and then even in Wing Commander when they started doing the motion video stuff in Wing Commander 3. It's like, oh look, it's John Rhys Davies.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, I think he's a great character, and obviously played him really well.
Awesome.
And I've gotten partial to dwarves too. I like dwarves. I think most of the games that I play Dungeons and Dragons, when I'm a player, I'm usually a dwarf. So
my first D&D character was a dwarf, and
nice.
That's going back to, I think, his second edition Dungeons and Dragons. And
oh wow.
is like, okay, I'm new to this. I really like dwarves, and I like how they're in the technical aspect of it, like they're medium creatures, but like they're short and stout, like they're solid as a rock.
Right, exactly. I like playing I think in all the role playing games that I've played, like Skyrim, I was huge on Skyrim and Morrowind and Oblivion and all those games. I always wanted to play like a stout character that also knew spells. So like it would be almost like a dwarven warlock, kind of like a battle mage.
Gotcha.
So, yeah, I was into that kind of stuff too.
How long have you been into Zelda for, just out of curiosity?
Oh gosh, I got my first N64. I think it was maybe I don't even know when it came out. It had to be late 90s at some point. I got it like the year it came out, and that was one of my first games I bought. I remember going to the store, and I bought Mario Kart and Wave Race. And Wave Race was like the jet ski game that was so boring, but at the time it was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Look at these graphics. So I got that, and then shortly after I bought Zelda as soon as it came out, Ocarina of Time. Then I got Majora's Mask. I had got like the gold cartridge. I was so pumped about that. So yeah, I've been in for a while now. I have not played the newest one. I don't have a Switch yet, and I'm really jealous about all my friends who go out and buy one and say it's like the greatest game they've ever played. So.
Yeah, I got to play it for a few minutes over at my friend's house, but as people who have been listening to this podcast know, there's a video game series or type that I can't do, and it's the action adventure games like Zelda. Really? I for whatever reason I cannot do them as far as moving and combat at the same time. It's just not something like. I'm more traditional Final Fantasy. My people stand in a line, and I tell them what to do, and then they do it. Yes.
Yeah. That's interesting. You might be the first person I've ever heard say that. Like, I couldn't get into Zelda. I just couldn't do it.
Well, I like watching people play Zelda.
Sure.
But actually being able to enjoy the game is not something that me and Zelda just don't go along together.
You don't jive. What about like first-person shooters then? Any kind of movement and action?
Oh my gosh!
At the same time.
So one of my friends, Joey from Hexes and Bows podcast, he does Overwatch online, and he had asked me, "Oh, when are you going to get Overwatch so we can play together?" I'm like, I haven't played first-person shooters since Wolfenstein and Doom back in the early 90s, where it's up, down, left, right, spacebar.
Yep. That's funny.
Again, it's just there's too many, okay, press this combination to look up and strafe and point your gun down. It's just too much. I'm very old school.
As soon as they brought in 2 joysticks on a controller, it's like the whole world shifted. But no, I remember playing Call of Duty. Gosh, in college we would play from sun up to sundown, and we would try to get the best KD ratio, and we'd be mad if we handed the controller to somebody who didn't know how to play. Like, they couldn't play on our account because we needed that KD ratio up. We were into it.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, for us, when we played in college, it was normally somebody would play Final Fantasy X, and then everyone else would watch.
Yeah, it's like a movie. Those games,
pretty much
there's so many cutscenes, and you really are watching a movie.
Yeah, that's pretty much what we did. But again, most of my time in college, when it wasn't spent in class or doing my homework, was playing role-playing games. I mean, 3rd edition came out when I was a junior in college, and on top of that, it was White Wolf and Star Wars all at the same time. We played from Friday night, 7 o'clock. We would end probably at 1 or 2 in the morning, go to bed, meet up again Saturday around noon, play again until Saturday night, 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, play again Sunday.
Yeah, that's awesome. Were you always a player, or were you ever a game master?
I was a player for the first about year and a half.
Yeah.
I ran Star Wars, and I ran Vampire the Masquerade, which is one of the White Wolf games back in the day. And I'm good at that, and I've run more recently like an Eberron play-by-post game,
Oh, okay.
forum-based a few years ago.
Yeah, I do
But
that too right now. I play as a player on Gamers Plan, I think it's called,
okay,
in like 3 different games right now. So yeah, I like those play by post things. You can kind of play at your own pace. You can really think about what your character might say instead of, coming up with it on the spot. I'm sure it's
exactly.
helpful as a DM too.
Oh, absolutely. And for us, it was on Friday night we would play 4 hours in a separate like fourth edition game, and then all of us at the table would then also have the chance to play this fourth edition Eberron play by post game, and that
Hmm.
ran for about 2.5 years, give or take.
Oh, nice. Wow.
But it is real solid, real good, like definitely enjoyable, and something that I like that now, and I must have learned about actual play podcast pretty late. Like I had
Hmm.
heard about Critical Role, but
Right.
there's so much backlog and hours and hours and hours to catch up on
And it's all video
that
based, so you got to like really sit there and focus. You can't just listen while you're mowing the lawn or whatever.
yeah. So when I don't even know how I came across your podcast, which is crazy. I think it might have been in the like one of the Facebook groups
Yeah.
when you first started up. But it's like I'm getting it on the ground floor. Like heck yeah, I'm gonna subscribe to this actual play podcast. And I mean, I subscribe to 2 now. It's yours and then Venture Maidens.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I
A-
listen to them too.
And
Yeah.
getting, especially with You Meet in a Tavern, which is your actual play podcast, it's really fun to actually have started out with episode 1 and be relatively caught up, like not having to be like, oh man, I'm still like 15 episodes behind or 20 episodes behind on
Right.
where they are now, or the ones that have been going for years, and you're like, do I start at episode 1 or do I just try to jump in and get a handle on what's going on?
Right.
So I guess let's talk about Dungeons and Dragons. You got into Dungeons
Okay.
and Dragons. What edition did you start with?
I started with 5th edition actually, and I was just going to say this. I'm jealous about hearing all these things that you did in college because I know I had friends that would have really been into it. It just never came up. I didn't really. I always heard about Dungeons and Dragons, like this mysterious game, this satanic thing that it always had this like bad stigma about it. So I never got into it. The first time I actually sat down to play, I was a teacher. I taught math for 5 years at a high school, and these people, these kids wanted to start a Dungeons and Dragons club, and they needed a moderator. And I was pretty close to the kids. I was young. We had like a good dynamic. So I said, sure, I'll stay after work a little bit, grade some papers once a week,
Mm-hmm.
and watch you guys play Dungeons and Dragons. And they started, and I was like, okay, wait a minute. This looks awesome. Can I create a character? So I got into the game. One of the girls, she was like 15-year-old girl, was DMing this game for all of us, and I created a character. I don't even remember what race or class it was, but I think that must have been 9 years ago now. So it was probably 4th edition, I think was the
Probably.
big thing then. Yeah. So I guess I started in 4th edition playing that character, but that only lasted. We probably played for a few months. It was more like a one shot kind of thing. We played for an hour at a time, and then I got into 5th edition real hard after listening to some actual play podcasts, some popular ones like the Adventure Zone, and like Critical Hit. I listen to Venture Maidens now, and I really like. I think they're an interesting group because it's all females, and you don't really get that a
Yes.
whole lot, which is really really awesome. So I like listening to them. I think I'm about halfway through their log of episodes right now. But that's how I got started, was really actual play podcasts. And I said, okay, I want to sit down with friends around my age this time and actually play a game. So I bought the starter set. I went to the store and spent $15 and bought the starter set, read through the story, invited 5 or 6 guys over, and just ran it for them. And we sat for like 6 hours and played this game.
Sweet.
And I was hooked. And I'm like, okay, I need to find some good, funny people, and we need to do a podcast because I think that the dynamic between me and my friends is really great, and I think to share that, people would really enjoy that, listening to us. So
Now, before you started the game, did you get to play in any other games beforehand, or was it more like you played in the school and then after that, like you were hooked and you just dove in on the DM side of things?
I think after I played in the school, I really didn't pick anything up until about 6 years later, maybe. I've really only recently been into it. I mean, this is like 2 or 3 years. I remember one of my friends had a trip coming up, like a road trip. He was going across the country, and he asked for recommendations for podcasts. And someone commented, "Go check out the Adventure Zone. It's a really funny group of guys that sit around and play D&D." And I just saw that, and I was like, you know what? That sounds fun. Like I've got a long commute, so I'll listen to it back and forth. And that's what really got me hooked on it.
Yeah, most people, I always hear the expression or the cries on the internet, especially in different areas, like, oh man, there's so many people that want to play like as players, but there's not enough people to actually run the game.
Oh right, yeah. I started as a DM when I got really into it. And all my friends have been like, okay, when are we going to play again? And I said, well, it's really hard when you create a homebrew and you're like creating your own world. A lot goes into that planning. Mm-hmm. So they always want me to DM, and I was like, well, you know what? Why don't you guys give it a shot? But I have, yeah, exactly. Take some of the time off of me. But yeah, getting really deep into it, I've always kind of been on the DM side of things.
What's your favorite thing to do or see as a dungeon master? Like when you have your group, like, is there something that makes you like happy on the inside, whether it's like, oh yeah, I almost took you out, or seeing them succeed, or like them getting to some part of the thing that you've designed and seeing like them overcome it or resolve it? Like what's your favorite things to see as a dungeon master?
I think I'm not a dungeon master that's like, oh, all right, I'm going to throw them a bunch of baddies, and if they don't survive, awesome, we'll start over and do something else. I'm not like an evil DM. I really like, my favorite part about DMing and just Dungeons and Dragons in general is the ability to create this world that's all in your head. You like create this space. It's almost like you're writing a book, like the skeleton form of a book, and you're dropping your players in it and just seeing what they do. And then, just the character development, I think is incredible, especially in the podcast where we have a little bit more, we have because it's only 3 people and we have this kind of campaign that I said, when we start this podcast, guys, like this is going to be like a 2-year at least commitment. So you got to tell me that you're into it. And talking with them about their characters and how they, from where they grew up to where they are now and things that they want to do with their characters. And it's really like they're creating these people that have their own personalities and their own emotions and their own way they interact with the world that I create. That's really just an amazing part of being someone who's creating the story, and just Dungeons and Dragons in general, that you can totally go outside yourself and be whoever you want to be. So that's got to be my favorite part.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you're not having these characters that are static and just getting XP and leveling up and still being the same from point A to point B to point C. They actually get to develop and change and grow and build new relationships. And one of the things I enjoy is like, you have to sometimes with certain players, you have to remind them, like, just because you guys are the player characters, the NPCs also are growing and changing and building relationships, and what your actions towards them can affect future interactions later down the road.
Right.
And for me, when I was running the Eberron play-by-post game, they had several interactions with basically lower class characters like goblinoids and whatever, and they had treated them very well. And months later down the road, when they got into a situation, those same characters that they had helped out came to help them out in a very precarious situation and got them out of like some big trouble. So
that's cool.
Like, I know that it's always one of those things where people are like, oh, who cares about NPCs? But I know that I enjoy players who interact and develop not just within the group, but in the entire world.
Yeah. And that's similar to something that happened in our podcast when they came to this cave and they saw a frost giant outside the cave entrance. I think it was like episode 4 or 5. And they, you know, they were scared, and you know, they talked. We have a character named Durf who has a pet rat, Eugene, and he talked Eugene into kind of distracting the frost giant so that they could sneak in the cave. And there's a point where the frost giant was running, and they found out that it was actually chained to the mountain, like it was a prisoner. And one of our characters was like, whatever, let's just go. Like, we can sneak past it. And the other two were like, well, wait a second. Maybe we could help this guy out. And they ended up freeing him. This is spoiler alert, by the way. I guess I should have said that. Whatever. They end up freeing him. And in the next episode, he comes and kind of saves them from almost certain death. So, yeah. And that was totally unplanned, but I didn't know they were going to free them. I didn't know what was going to happen. It just kind of worked out for that, for their best way out.
Yeah, typically when you see a frost giant, the it's either runaway or full on straight attack.
Right, exactly. And I like that. So the players in our podcast are all new to D&D. So I like that they've never encountered a frost giant in any of their other games.
Mm-hmm.
So they don't really know what the personalities of most frost giants are, what they're supposed to do. So I think that brings a new dynamic. I mean, they're really playing as their characters, which have no idea about the outside world. And that kind of helps them to make decisions that are fresh and new. So that's pretty cool.
How did you decide? So you played you ran as a dungeon master, and you're like, oh, this is going to be cool. Did you whittle it down from the 6 people or 5 or 6 people that played to the 3 that you have now? Or was it just that they had the availability to play in for the podcast?
Yeah, I think, the 3 that I play with now actually none of them were a part of that original 6.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I have a really good buddy, Kirk, and I knew him in college, and he's one of the funniest dudes I know. So he's a big nerd. He has a podcast about the Pokemon trading card game that he does. So he's a big card nerd. He played Magic the Gathering and all that. And I know he has played a little bit of D&D 3.5 edition. And then I had another buddy who I've known since high school. His name is Chris. We call him Jamal. And he's a really funny guy too. And then Brian, who was one of Kirk's buddies from college, he's a big nerd. So it was they were all available for it and willing to commit to a 2-year thing. And I knew that the 4 of us have gotten together a few times and always had a good time hanging out. We were all in Kirk's wedding, which was
gotcha.
year or 2 ago. So I just knew there was a good dynamic there, and we were all willing and wanting to play D&D. So I thought, all right, let's run with this.
As a new player or a new dungeon master, I've never played 5th edition. I have the book, but I haven't had time to really read through it. What do you like about the system?
I don't really have anything to compare it to. I think it's very simple. I think, the player's handbook is easy to follow. I think it's a good addition for anybody that wants to start out to play, just because of the simplicity of it all. I know I've heard things about other editions where it's like too complicated. There's too many rules. Not that we follow all the rules in our podcast. We kind of stray from the book a little bit just to kind of fit our group. But yeah, I think the fact that it's simple and it's a good addition to learn from is my favorite thing about it.
I'm hoping to eventually dive into the book. I spent the money to have it, and to not read it is criminal. It's just that sadly I don't have a game to go play currently, so it's like I can push it off and just listen to other people and how they play, and I'm like, oh, an advantage. Oh, what's that? Okay, yeah. I'm picking up the little pieces through the podcast episodes.
Right. Yeah. And they're always adding new things too, which is cool. They do Unearthed Arcana, which is kind of, they create like new classes and new spells. And new objects to interact with. So we try to incorporate that in the podcast as much as we can. So some of the new stuff that's still kind of in the testing phase, but is released by Wizards of the Coast.
Yes, I still follow them to this day, and I'm like, oh, look, neat stuff.
Yeah, it's cool. It's such a fun game.
As far as the podcast goes, it's called You Meet in a Tavern, and you've been running it now. I think you're on episode 11 or 12 as we record this.
Yeah,
I don't have my phone up.
No, that's all right. Episode 10, as we're recording this, is actually going up tomorrow, which is June 12th. So
Okay.
I think maybe by the time this goes out, we'll be at 11 or 12.
And you release every other week.
Yes.
Correct?
Yeah, we release every 2 weeks on Mondays.
So you've been running about 3 months now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah?
Yeah, I think we started end of February. I think that makes sense. End of February, beginning of March is when our first episode went out. Yeah, we had a break. At one point, we had to skip a week because of some stuff that came up that we weren't able to release. But
so for those who are listening, what goes into making the actual play podcast?
well, like any other D&D campaign, there has to be a story. So coming up with a homebrew campaign where I create this world and all these characters in it, that takes up the most of my time. I haven't. It's not like when you're playing D&D, it's not like you're writing a novel as a game master. You're kind of drawing a skeleton, and the players are going to fill in the flesh and the bone and the all the meat of the story. So I try to there's obviously a clear end goal in mind, and there's NPCs that I throw into their world, and this like subplots what they have to where they could decide if they want to go complete this quest or do this or do this. So creating all that takes a lot of time. Just like any other D&D game. But then behind the scenes, I guess as a podcast, it's a little bit different because there's a lot of editing that goes into it. All the music that you'll hear in the podcast is created by me I use GarageBand. So that takes up a little bit of time. But it's all fun. It's all fun stuff. I enjoy working on it. And then, of course, from running a podcast, you've got to do like the publicity and the tweeting and the social media and all that kind of stuff that goes into getting the word out about your podcast and getting people on board to listen and enjoy and communicating with fans and all that. So yeah, there's a lot that goes into it for sure.
When I started this podcast, I thought the hardest thing that I was going to have to do was actually find people that would be willing to give up their 45 minutes or an hour to do a recording.
Yeah.
And it turns out, at least on my end, the hardest part about doing a podcast is the social media and getting that word out there and publicity and trying to drum up interest. And like, for example, on my end, we had a Wonder Woman review episode come out last week, which, I mean, that was June 4th or June 3rd, somewhere around there.
Right.
And every time the Wonder Woman Facebook page posts, if I can get to it within like the first minute or two and make that first comment, or within like the first 4 or 5 comments, I get eyes on it, and I get eyes on the podcast and the episode, and maybe someone will like it, or maybe someone will check it out.
Yeah,
but
you get bumped up right to the top then, right? Because you're first.
If I'm one of those top ones, or if enough people like click on the likes to get it up to like be one of those top comments. But it is like I've had to learn how to use Instagram to do all the hashtags and do Twitter and learn about like tweeting and like actually interacting with people and talking back and forth, not even about the podcast, but about random stuff, and then build that that rapport and friendship with people to the point where they're retweeting stuff and they like what I'm doing, so therefore they're going to share it with their people. Like it is a lot of work that I did not expect.
No, you don't think about that. You're like, okay, I'm gonna create something great, and people are just gonna flood to look at it and see it, and it's gonna be awesome. But yeah, there's a lot of that involved. I think it's funny you brought up how you got into the podcast. I think on Facebook, on the Facebook Messenger, like that was a completely calculated effort on my part to put our name out there so people would listen, even if they're other podcast creators, because they might like D&D. So
absolutely,
I think I started the best thing that got us off the ground and running was I started we do an intermission in the middle of our episodes where I will just shout out some of our links to our social media, but also do a podcast promo. So I will connect with 2 or 3 podcasts and say, hey, you know what, we'll shout you out as a podcast that our listeners should check out, and it's all kind of nerd related geek stuff, and we'll shout you out on our podcast, and we just ask that you say something quick about ours, and that really helps because we give them a new audience that might check out our podcast, and then our name is mentioned on there. So I think that's really helped us to get a lot of new listeners.
Absolutely. It's one of the things that I know on some of my episodes, I have time to where I can do like a little intro before the episode starts. Or if I don't have time to do it, it'll be on like every Sunday. I try to do that on our Facebook page where I like talk about a podcast or like a group or something that I'm really into. And I know that a while back I had done You Meet in a Tavern. I think I talked about it a few times on a few different podcast episodes. But it's like sharing the stuff that you find. You don't want to keep it to yourself. You want to be able to be like, hey, look at this. It's really cool. You should check it out.
Yeah, and podcasts are just such a great medium that's gaining, so much traction ever since Serial and This American Life and all those big things came out. I think it's easy because you can listen to it on your way to and from work, at the gym, mowing the lawn. It's a great medium for things that you enjoy. So I strongly recommend anyone to just go out and start typing stuff in that you like, and download every podcast you can and check everything out. So
absolutely. And you just give it a try. Like somebody had recommended a podcast to me that they loved, and I listened to it, and it's like, that's not for me. However, maybe I'll like something that's in the same vein, that's different. Like I'm not, as far as podcasts go, I'm not a big true crime person.
Right. Mm-hmm.
But I know they're really popular, so I gave one of them a chance. I was like, too much joking back and forth about a serious subject.
Right.
I'm limited for my travel time is like 30 minutes, basically one way, and then 30 minutes another way. So I get about an hour, and it's like, okay, I can fit in an hour, maybe an hour and 10 minutes. So that's generally like one podcast. So it's like every day is one podcast.
Yeah. One episode, right?
One episode.
Yeah.
So you've made You Meet in a Tavern.
Mm-hmm.
You have 3 players. Can you tell us a little bit about them?
Yeah, absolutely. So as I said before, the players are my buddies Kirk, Jamal, and Brian. We're all around the same age, kind of late 20s, early 30s. Kirk plays a halfling monk named Tug Mugbar, and he's kind of like he's short, obviously, because he's a halfling. He's half pint. He is a bearded, fist wrap, only uses his fists in combat, kind of halfling with a Napoleon complex who grew up his whole life in a bar. He lost his father really young, so he didn't really have a whole lot of that fatherly figure direction. So he grew up in a bar, helping out the people, take out the trash and wipe down the counters. And he kind of grew up underneath the bartender there, and grew up under his wing, and kind of taught him the ways of fighting off patrons. And that's how he kind of learned to be just this rough and tough kind of little guy. We have Jamal plays a half elf druid named Turftoe. I really like the names that they came up with. They're pretty good. Turftoe. He's a druid who, and Jamal himself is a very political person. He's a lawyer by trade. It's funny that he came up with this character that's like all about equality in the town of Woodhaven that they grew up in. And he went to town. He lived on the outskirts of town with his mother, and went into town and saw that there was this great divide between like the upper class and the lower class. So he basically made it his goal in the town when he was really young to steal from the rich and give to the poor, kind of like a Robin Hood type character. So he's got a background in burglary. So it's a funny dynamic within the story where Tug and Durf will like fight to see who can steal the most stuff and who's the best burglar out of the two of them.
Right.
Kind of like a Legolas Gimli kind of fight, which is pretty funny.
And it's hilarious because it's a druid. Like you don't expect the druid to be doing that kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. So I like it's like he can turn into a rat and sneak into someone's house, and grab a couple coins or whatever he needs to for someone less fortunate. So I think that's really cool that he took his character in that direction. And then we have a third character. Brian plays a human paladin named Carl with a K, and his last name is with a K. spelled with a C, but his first name is spelled with a K. So again, another genius name. And he is a paladin who, he's like any other college kid who's not really sure about his morality, maybe. I think he grew up as a paladin with his father, who kind of showed him the ways of the sword and the shield, and his god is Mashakal, and that was his father's god, and he inherited his father's holy symbol. So he's kind of always gone in that direction because that's what the only thing he's known. So he kind of struggles with his faith throughout the campaign, and again, I don't want to give any spoilers away, but something pretty traumatic happens, and he's not sure if he still believes. So he picks this. Paladins have an order, and he picks this order that's kind of away from the teachings of the god that he knew. So that's a cool dynamic as well. Just seeing this paladin figure that's kind of like a broken character who's not really sure if he believes or not, and that creates some interesting stuff. So if you listen to episode 10, I'm super pumped to release this episode because there's something pretty huge that happens with his character that's pretty cool. So
one of the things that I really liked that you did was do individual. You sat down with them for about, give or take, like 15 or 20 minutes in like a kind of like a break of the actual adventure. They had done something, then they had to wait for the next part of the story to really happen. You're able to really dive into their characters because the start of the story kind of like threw them into a situation and like is go, and then is nice to have them be able to take that moment, pause, and reflect on what has happened during that portion of time, because it's like, it's nice as a listener to get to listen to them talk about like what has happened, what's going on, like how are they feeling. And I remember when the paladin chose Carl with a K, chose that specific order. I was like, I think you had also had that same reaction, like what, like that, what do you mean? Like, where are you going with this? And I was like, what's going on? Because I'm not familiar enough with the 5th edition order type stuff, but I am familiar enough with like the paladins of the past to know like you're like treading on some possible alignment things, but interesting that it's in that book. And I really was excited when he explained why he was choosing it and how he had plans for the future to like maybe resolve it or change it back or just and go from there. And I really enjoyed, like, that is probably one of my favorite episodes just because, and I think I mention it a lot on my podcast when we talk about fandoms, I really love background and getting to know more, like more about the cities or towns or the people, and getting to know more about the characters and their backstories and how they became who they are now and where they are hopefully going is one of the greatest things that I enjoy personally.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, that was such a cool decision he chose for his character. And I think I like how I did that in the episode, as not to toot my own horn, but I am glad we did that as an episode. I basically told them beforehand, I said, hey, listen, I'm still kind of writing this second arc. Why don't we have an episode where we learn more about your characters so people can connect with you? I think people want to listen to something that they connect to. And we have 3 completely different personalities. And I just told them, exactly. I just told them, I want to hear more about who your character is and why they are that way, and what you've been thinking about everything that's been going on in your life, because there's this huge shift in what they used to know and what they know now. And they took that and just ran with it. I mean, they did an amazing job coming up with backstories that I had absolutely no input going into. And because of some of the things that they have said about their characters, I have taken parts of the future of the campaign and thrown them out and rewritten them. So I'm really excited to see how their characters resolve some of the stuff that they brought up in that episode. So
as a listener, I'm super excited to see where they go. I think I'm currently on the episode now because I had started it and I hadn't been able to get through it. Where it's Durf is druid, right? I'm
Yeah,
so
yeah.
sorry. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Where he's turned into a camel, and I'm like, well, I guess
Yep.
if you got that power, you might as well use it.
Yeah, that's what he said. As soon as I mentioned the desert in game, the episode before, he says, "Oh, I'm so excited because I just learned I can turn into a camel. I'm doing that immediately," and he did. He did it.
Oh my gosh, it's just the funny bits that come up, or the Eugene.
Yeah.
Like, so sometimes I feel bad for you having to do the
Oh
New
my
York
gosh.
accent. Like,
Yeah, we'll be in the middle of some other thing going on in the story, and they'll be like, "Well, let's see what Eugene thinks about this," and I've got to come up with this New York accent for this rat. And I think when I hear fans when they like tweet at us or give us reviews or tell us about the show, like they always say, "Man, Eugene is my favorite character. I love Eugene," and he was never supposed to be a part of the story whatsoever. When in the first episode, when they go to see the animal dealer and Durf, I gave Durf like 3 or 4 options of animals he could buy or he didn't have to buy them, and he chose the rat, and then Eugene just came to be a part of the story, and now he's like a key part of the group. And I love that about D&D, and I love that about this podcast, about how characters come up and then fans fall in love with them, and it was like, that was never supposed to happen, but awesome. I'm so glad it did.
right, because most people, when they choose like an animal companion, it's all about, oh, what is it going to give me as a character, and then that's it. Like, it's like they don't care about the creature. They don't like build a bond with it. It's just like, oh yeah, it's giving me a +2 to whatever. And to have Eugene be almost like an equal part, like, let's ask Eugene. Like, Eugene is a rat. Like,
Yeah,
why are you
exactly.
asking a rat? But like
Yeah.
Eugene has like an intelligence level equivalent to like a normal character at this point.
Exactly. Yeah, he really does. And and Durf can only understand him, so I think they have like a bond. And if I ever put Eugene in danger, there would be an uproar, an absolute uproar.
Oh yeah, it's just like dogs in movies. Like, oh no, you don't kill the dog.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I think that's really cool that happened. I'm excited.
What do you look for in other actual play podcasts? Like, what would make you click on something to try it out or subscribe to it, just out of curiosity?
Yeah, I am really big into the story aspect of things. I like I think the podcast is called Friends at a Table, which is a pretty popular one. They're all about like world building and campaign, and really like some deep concepts that they get into. So I like that. I'm not really into podcasts that are all jokes all the time. And I feel like I kind of do that a disservice a little bit in the first couple episodes. We tell a whole lot of jokes, but they're just learning how to play D&D. In our first episode, all they want to do is like steal from people, because that's what you do. And as a beginner D&D player, I'm sure you've had like groups that are like, oh yeah, I'm going to kill him. Like, why are you going to kill him? Just because you can? Or, but when I look at other podcasts, I like a good balance of story and comedy, where there's a story and a campaign and something that I can get behind and want to listen to the next episode. I like character development, where you connect with the characters in some way. And I actually like actual play podcasts that have few players. I feel like there's a lot out there that have like 6 or 7, and it's just so difficult to get into to figure out whose voice is whose. So I think 3 is a good number. That's why I like Venture Maidens, because they have 3 characters. So it's easy to follow. The story's great. I think the characters the players have to have a good dynamic between each other. They bounce ideas off each other. They're not talking over each other. The DM has let's see what I'm trying to say, where the players and the DM are not battling against each other in like a malicious kind of way. Right, I can't think of the word right now. In a malicious kind of way, where they're fighting and the players are kind of saying, that's not what the rule is. It's got to be a team effort to create something and produce something that other people are going to want to listen to. So,
absolutely. I know I mentioned to you, I think through Facebook, that I'm in the process of starting an actual play podcast. and I had asked you a few questions about it, and one of the things that's interesting to me when I listen to some of them is how they handle like traveling. And you have like the easiest way to do it is okay, teleport, like go through the portal. They're not having to travel, and the next 10 days they've spent traveling along, the bumpy roads
right. And that goes with a few different things in the podcast itself. I think just creating an actual play podcast, it's a little different than just running a D&D game. You're not just running a game for people. You are creating a story that has to be fluid some way. Mm-hmm. So I think there's a little bit more railroading as far as GMs go in podcasts than in normal games where you can just kind of let them do whatever they want to do all the time. Because if you're listening to episodes and you want it to like play itself out like a movie, there's got to be some kind of direction. So yeah, I think as a podcast, you really want to tell a story, and you can't just talk about, traveling or what did you eat today, and make sure you have enough rations, and all this kind of stuff. So
what's your encumbrance?
Right, exactly. Oh, you can't carry that. I mean, it's a fantasy, but guy can carry like 3 battle axes, and he puts those somewhere, but it doesn't.
Right.
In the story, it doesn't matter. Like it doesn't matter all that behind the scenes stuff. So we stray from the rules a little bit, but we're just in it to have fun and tell a good story that people are going to enjoy.
When you're setting the episode up, do you try to have like a beginning, middle, and end for each episode as you are like recording them, or have it laid out so that way for the people who are listening, they have like, instead of like, I know for the more recent episodes with the Frost Giant and everything, there's like the key, like there's a key battle in each one, or a key fight, and then they had like dialogue and adventuring, and like, do you set that up, or is it just something that happens?
Kind of a little bit of both. I think when I write the story, I set it up so that there are like sections of where, okay, if this episode were to stop here, like that would be okay. Another part of it is just, I just let them play for an hour, and wherever we stop, we stop. And I try to pick a part that would be good for like a cliffhanger at the end of an episode. So, they're traveling through a dungeon, and all of a sudden they meet this big bad evil guy, and I introduce him, and then the episode ends. So like the next episode starts with the fight that they're gonna be a part of. So I don't write it like a book where they have to get to this point by the end of the episode.
Okay.
It's funny. So we met together as a group at a table, as a physical table, when everyone was in town, because Jamal lives in Chicago. And that episode, just because we were all together and having a good time, we got through maybe half a page of the notes that I had for that episode. And that was intended to be like a 5-minute encounter that turned into a whole hour of them kind of messing up and figuring out what to do. So,
right.
So yeah, I don't set it up to be okay, this has to be episode 1 and this has to be episode 2.
Okay.
Kind of let them go for an hour, and wherever we stop, that's where we stop.
Do you have a favorite character?
Oh, I can't say that. I can't say that. You mean like PC or?
Yeah, I was going to say PC, but I know I wouldn't make you do that.
I think they all have qualities that I really enjoy. I love that Tug is this kind of hard ass that actually brought the group to think, guys, we just lost our town. Like, this is a big deal, even though he's supposed to be like this tough guy who can kind of takes no crap from anybody. I like Durf and his druid / burglar style. And he's super intelligent and kind of has the best ideas for the group and what they're going to do. And then I love Carl's dynamic of this kind of lost paladin, and wanting to lead the group, but just being so shy and unsure of himself. So yeah, I mean, there's things about each of the characters I love. I can't really pick a favorite at all. I shouldn't say that.
Yeah, it totally good. It's all good. So we have you meet in a tavern 2 years, like that's at the bare minimum 2 years, hopefully. Like crossing fingers.
Yeah, I think so. Based on how the story's going right now, they're about I'd say they're about maybe an eighth through, and it's been 3 months. So what's that? 3 times 8? That's 24. That's 2 years, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, something
That's
along
impressive
those lines.
math right there.
Well, I taught math, and I work in a math profession now, so I'm used to that. Yeah, I think at least 2 years. That's the commitment that I told them. I don't know. We have no plans for what's going to happen afterwards. We've got kind of a great response from the podcast right now. We'll see where we're at in about a year. If people want more, maybe we'll do more, or maybe just end with a really good story that people can listen to. So,
And for those people who are listening, where are the best places for them to find You Meet in a Tavern?
Sure, yeah. We are on pretty much all social media platforms, and the handle that you can find us at is YMIA Tavern. We're on Twitter, Facebook page. We have an Instagram. Something that recently started, we created a subreddit where we post the episodes and then some other kind of behind the scenes stuff. So if you're a fan and want to know more about the guys or talk to other fans, join our subreddit, and that's YMIA Tavern as well.
How is Reddit? I've never used it, and it scares me.
It is a little scary. It's a little scary. There's a lot of people on Reddit, a lot of mad people on Reddit. But it's a good platform. I mean, there's tons of D&D subreddits where DMs will like bounce off ideas. There's several RPG and actual play podcast subreddits. So it's a good forum to kind of share your knowledge and gain some other knowledge from other people that play the games. So yeah, I mean, I use it a lot for publicity. I post the episodes as they get released on like RPG podcasts and the D&D subreddit and podcasts. There's a podcast subreddit that's got like just hundreds of thousands of followers, and they always have a share your stuff pinned link that everyone can kind of comment and post their podcasts on. So yeah, if you haven't gotten on board with that, I think that would be great. I think you should.
I'll have to check it out, especially with the upcoming eventual launch, if I can get my players to actually do anything.
Yeah, absolutely. And you got to let me know when you guys release something. We'll put a little blurb out in one of our episodes.
Absolutely. And Joe, I did want to ask you one thing. You had mentioned that you're doing like a play-by-post a few games. What is the website for people if they're interested in that?
Oh yeah, Gamers Plane. That is, I think it's www.gamersplane.com. There's a lot of different systems. It's not just Dungeons and Dragons. You can kind of join any game. I know they have the same problem where they've got a whole bunch of players, not as many DMs. So if you want to give DMing a shot at first, if you want to learn some of the rules, and I think a play-by-post is a good place to learn how to DM, because you can take your time with what you want the characters to do, and you don't have to improv as much. I think that's the biggest kind of deterrent for people that start and they're afraid that they're going to mess up or say something that they shouldn't or mess the story up. So I think that's a good place because you can take your time and write what you want to write and think about it more. So gamersplane.com. Yeah.
And that's plain like PLANE, not like plain like, okay.
Yeah, I heard about it. Yeah, I heard about it from an episode of the RPG Academy, which is a pretty popular RPG podcast based in the same place we're based, Cincinnati.
Awesome. Well, Joe, I know you have things to do with You Meet in a Tavern that you need to get to and wrap things up on your end. And I'll be shepherding a new episode into existence in a few hours on my side.
Excellent.
So I wanted to thank you for taking the time, not only for recording this episode, but with like me being able to like bounce messages off of you and just curiously ask questions and watch your podcast grow and become like one of the ones that I see a lot on Twitter mentioned. And you know, I follow you guys on Twitter, and it's like, oh, look at like all the mentions and the bounce offs, and a lot of people do that, like that Follow Friday thing. Oh yeah, it's like, great. You Meet in a Tavern is like one of the ones that I see highlighted a lot. So I'm super happy for your success.
Well, that's awesome, David. I really appreciate it. I hope you find the same success in the stuff that you create. So I'm excited to listen.
Well, again, thank you for coming on this current podcast and talking about You Meet in a Tavern and Lord of the Rings and all that good stuff.
Sure thing. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to Tales from the Fandom. Subscribe on iTunes or your podcast app of choice. Like us at www.facebook.com/talesfromthefandom to see photos, links and check out upcoming guests. You can also find us on Twitter at TalesFTFandom. We now have a Patreon at patreon.com/talesfromthefandom if you'd like to help support the show. If you'd like to be a guest, have a Kickstarter preview or product review, email David at talesfromthefandom@gmail.com.